Welcome to What the Fantasy. I am Brandon Hay, and you can find me on Twitter at HeyB3.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Zareh Cantabedian. You can find me at ZCansFF on Twitter. How you doing,
So,
Brandon?
I'm good. I'm good. Another great week of NFL football. A lot of comebacks, a lot of surprises. What really stood out to you for week two?
What stood out to me in week two was, the first thing that comes to mind is just the Lions, the tenacity of the Lions this week. I really do just love to see them thriving, and I love to see them thriving under a head coach like Dan Campbell. Uh, I think this isn't like a hard knocks take. Cause I only watched one episode of that. I didn't watch any of it really this offseason. But it's really cool to see all the pieces come together. It's great to see Jared Goff, succeed in a system. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, and we still got Jameson Williams coming, and DeAndre Swift, is looking better than ever. It's just good to see the offense coming together, and under a culture and a head coach who cultivates just a good culture. So that's that was surprising to see. I like to see them beat out the Washington Commanders and get their first victory of the season, go 1-1.
Yeah, definitely. And are they a possible top 10 offense for the rest of the year? Because they're getting Jameson Williams back. I mean, they have all the pieces, and even last week, DJ Chark didn't do much. TJ Hawkinson really hasn't gotten going. So, as long as Jared Goff can get it to those people, it's probably a borderline, it's at least fantasy wise, top 10 offense, I would think.
Yeah, I don't know like where it would place in like the offensive rankings, but I do know that they are a viable offense now, and not fringe either. Like they are a solid, viable offense in football and in fantasy. I think in both regards they are. Yeah.
Definitely. And, I know they got down pretty big to the Eagles the first week, but they were able to come back, and we saw what the Eagles defense did to Minnesota. Let's talk about that a little bit. I was very surprised on the Minnesota side how poor they looked. They never adjusted to anything defensively or offensively. I was very surprised by that. And Darius Slay had a great game, but I don't understand why they didn't target Adam Thielen more earlier in the game if Justin Jefferson was getting locked up.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they just put too much weight into their number one elite weapon, thinking that he would, open the gates for them to succeed and get drive down the field. And obviously that didn't happen. I mean, it's 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 just we have Darius Slay who play, and it's really hard to do that too. You can't just lock down a number one corner. But Darius Slay played he played out of his mind. He made good reads. He read the routes, and he read the quarterback, and he just played really solid football every single snap. And a testament to Darius Slay, because that's not an easy thing to do, to play that consistently against probably the best wide receiver in the league right now. And to play at that level for every single snap is a huge testament. And Jalen Hurts is looking smooth as butter, like unstoppable. That entire offense looks just as effortless, I think, as when you watch the Buffalo Bills, where it's not even a challenge really, where they're just cutting through defenses. That's what the Eagles look like this year. They look like they have a tool for every occasion. They have, you want to stop the run, fine. We're just going to go read option, or we're just going to toss it over to AJ Brown or Dallas Goedert or Devontae Smith. And their defense is a perfect complement, just like the Buffalo Bills. Strong defenses on both teams. Those are teams who are set to make the full push, the push the entire way. When you not counting injuries, if you look at teams in a vacuum, these teams are set to make the long to go all the way this year.
Definitely. And I was surprised the Vikings chose to play kind of deep coverage. And I would, at least from what my perspective is, I thought they would try to stop the run and make Jalen, complete at least difficult passes. They weren't making any of those passes difficult. But yeah, so the first week, AJ Brown went off. The second, this week it was pretty much everyone. Devonta got more play and everything. And Miles Sanders looks very good too. I know it was wiped out by a penalty, but Kenneth Gainwell had a nice little screen for himself, showed what he could do. So it looks like they're trying to, get him involved, and they throw Boston Scott. They have just so many weapons, and if that defense plays like that, very interesting. What do you think about the Bengals? Can they get it together after starting 0-2? That offense does not look right. It looks like they can move the ball. It's just they're having trouble scoring touchdowns.
I know Joe Burrow is still taking a lot of pressure. He's still getting sacked a lot. He's not comfortable back there. He's got like over 70 rushing yards in his first 2 weeks, I believe, as a quarterback, which is, he's mobile, but it's not something that it's not one of his tendencies to rush, to be a scrambler, So, so he's picking up a lot of rushing yards. And for somebody like Joe Burrow to be picking up that many rushing yards through the first 2 weeks of the season is very telling of the offensive line woes this year. I think they just got to make some adjustments. I don't really know what's wrong with them. The word on the street is that they don't know how to deal with the cover 2 look. And I don't know when this cover 2 look started becoming such a problem. I remember it became a problem with Patrick Mahomes, I believe, last year. But, cover 2 has been around for a long time. So I always wanted to have a discussion with somebody who understood defensive schemes better. But why cover 2 is all of a sudden such a problem? Cover 2 essentially means, like, quarterbacks, when they make their reads at the snap, they always look at what I've been taught is that they always look at the top of the field for the shell of the coverage first, right? So they're always looking at the safety. Cover 1 means the middle of the field is closed, which means you're going on the outsider, right? Cover 3 and cover one basically mean you're going to the cover 1 basically means you're going to the outside. Cover 2 means the middle of the field open, you're going to the inside because there's that big gap in the middle of the field. So I don't know if they don't have any routes set up for that kind of stuff. I don't know why they struggle. But I have faith that they'll pivot. They have 2 of the best receivers. Three really good receivers, a viable tight end right now, strong running game. There's no reason why they shouldn't rebound. But a loss to the Cowboys, a loss to Trubisky, Cooper Rush. Is that his name? Cooper Rush? What's his guy's name?
Yeah.
Cooper Rush.
That's his name.
And then they're gonna play Joe Flacco. Imagine losing to those 3 quarterbacks in the first 3 weeks of the season.
That would be rough. And back to the cover 2, I somewhat understood it last year with the Chiefs with Mahomes because Tyreek Hill's usually deep down the sidelines, and then you could just kind of double cover Kelsey. But like you said with the Bengals, they have 3 receivers. They have Mixon. They have Hurst. So I don't understand why they can't really get over that. I think maybe they're trying to take too many deep shots or slow developing plays, and they just need to get it out quick. It's a little confusing to me. Well, I know the first game, they moved the ball up and down the field. It's just Burrow kept on throwing those interceptions. So it will be interesting with the Jets. So the Jets won this week. Crazy fashion against the Browns. I caught the end of the last 2 minutes of that game. It was insanity. If Flacco wins this Nets game, so they're 2-1. If he beats the Bengals here, do they go back to Zach Wilson whenever he's healthy? You're on mute.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I would not go back to Zach Wilson. I mean, Zach Wilson has looked, like he's inept really at the position at the professional level. He hasn't shown any reason why he should get the starting job. Flacco's gone in there and done a pretty good job, and he looks like he's warmed up to Garrett Wilson a lot, and they have the offensive pieces to go in there. He has the offensive, veteran savvy. Who would have thought? We all thought Joe Flacco was a joke. We all thought Joe Flacco was a joke coming into the season. We're like, oh, look, they signed Joe Flacco. This is hilarious. Here we go with Joe Flacco again. He just won't go away. With Zach Wilson, even in the preseason, he had 3 snaps, and he barely played 1 drive, and on that drive, he already threw a pick, during his first drive. That can't instill confidence in the coaches, and that can't create much leverage for you as a quarterback. With that being your only showing for the 2022 season, you throw a pick, and then we're supposed to come and replace you with a guy that led us on a comeback victory against the Browns on the road. Now we're at home against the Bengals. And we're playing in a very competitive division in the AFC with the Dolphins now being a freaking superpower all of a sudden. We're supposed to throw Zach Wilson back in there, and he's supposed to build momentum. Zach Wilson, come on, man. He was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league last year. He made the worst reads. He always threw interceptions. There's no reason to put him in there right now unless Joe Flacco completely falters. Then you put Zach Wilson in there, make the pivot. But right now, you ride with the momentum. I think Robert Saleh understands this, and I think they're going to continue with Joe Flacco, especially if Joe Flacco does win. Even if Joe Flacco doesn't win this week, I still think it's going to be a difficult decision to do.
I definitely agree, and at least they have the opportunity with the injury to at least extend. Maybe say, we want to give Zach Wilson a little more time, and I think Solid knows too. I mean, even though he just became the coach, he's got to win some games. So at least if he wins some games this year, and then maybe plays Zach Wilson near the back end, when maybe not they're out of contention or something, to get him, to figure out if they're going to move forward with him next year. But yeah, it's definitely tough. And Garrett Wilson had a great game, and I am a tad bit worried about Elijah Moore. He's not really getting the targets or getting the ball enough. Maybe with Garrett Wilson kind of coming out last game, teams will roll the coverage over more to Wilson. But yeah, that he's one of the players that I love. I love Elijah Moore's game, but he's just not getting the targets and getting those big plays so far.
Garrett Wilson is a player we'll touch on later in a segment coming up, but what he's doing right now, I think people are kind of like overlooking. They see it and they're acknowledging it, but they're not really looking at what he's going to do this season. I think Garrett Wilson's really set up to do some amazing things, and Elijah Moore is just, I mean, he's a great receiver. It's just that he's running. Garrett Wilson's running the routes like kind of more over the middle, where he's more accessible. Elijah Moore's locked up on the boundary with the number one DB. And I think right now, we have, Garrett Wilson, who's a formidable co-wide receiver, for Elijah Moore, and he's going to get open, and it's not Elijah Moore's world anymore. Elijah Moore is a great talent, but I don't think Joe Flacco. I think with a better quarterback, you don't have to worry about Elijah Moore. But I think with a quarterback like Joe Flacco, like it's just going to be harder to come by more efficient targets for both wide receivers.
Definitely. He's not on here because we're going to do buy sell, but I think Elijah Moore might be a buy, if someone's kind of a little worried about that, seeing Garrett Wilson, because I think when they do, either if it's Zach Wilson or someone beyond Joe Flacco, when they get, a better quarterback in there, he'll be able to spread the ball better. So, but let's go ahead and get to that buy or sell. So first, Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones had a huge game last week. They finally decided to give him the ball. As an A.J. Dillon owner, I wish at least one of those touchdowns could have gone to A.J. Dillon. But would you just keep Aaron Jones? Would you try to sell high after that great game? What's your opinion on Aaron Jones?
Well, I tried to sell high with Aaron Jones today. I mean, I had a Saquon Barkley owner come up to me and said, "What do you want for T. Higgins and Aaron Jones?" And I said that would require you to relinquish Saquon Barkley from your team to me. And he said, "No, I'm not going to do it." So, I mean, that's as high as I think. I mean, like how much more higher can you really go with Aaron Jones? Because after Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, and Jonathan Taylor, like there really isn't much. I mean, maybe you can sell him for Dalvin Cook. I think that's okay. That's not a bad idea. Maybe you can try to swap him out for Dalvin Cook. But there really aren't any other players you can go for here. I mean, you're not going to get Justin Jefferson unless the guy like has no running backs. I mean, based off of his last performance, you're going to sell high. But I mean, I really don't mind holding because Aaron Jones is, while he is the smaller of the two backs, he is the more efficient runner, and you just see it. Like he's just the more efficient runner. He just runs and he picks up more yards. Whereas A.J. Dillon, he gets a lot of volume too, but he's just kind of like a bully. And you want to see him get to that second level and get the, we'll see him do that. It's going to be awesome to do that when he does it. Get to the second level and go on this huge breakaway runs, and he's just bowling down the field. But Aaron Jones is a better receiver, and there you saw it last week where they were starting to line up Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon on the field at the same exact time. So that's a very encouraging sign. You don't see the Packers utilizing one wide receiver heavily. So I think Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon right now are pretty much holds. If you want to sell them, go ahead and sell them, but good luck getting what you want for them because it's going to be a little bit difficult. Trust me, I tried today. So based off of week 2, we saw that Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon were still the focus of that team. I think they're more of a focus on that team than Aaron Rodgers is right now. Like Aaron Rodgers is just distributing the ball where it has to go to, but A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones are the primary focus of that team. So I'd be holding Aaron Jones because he's a primary asset for a good offense.
No, I definitely agree. That's a big man. I can't believe the Barkley owner wouldn't do that. I probably would have if I had Barkley. But Aaron Jones, they use him a lot in the red zone too. They do a lot of those pop passes, on the when he's in motion, and Aaron likes to roll out and throw it to him. So definitely. So this is on here, but where do you think Aaron Rodgers is for this season? Because I don't think fantasy wise, I think he's still a great NFL quarterback, wins you games, but fantasy wise, without those receivers. I'm really starting to wonder where he really is, on the landscape of quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's tough to say rest of season because you don't know how those rookie wide receivers are going to shape up, or you don't know how he's gonna you know how he's gonna gel with Sammy Watkins as the year goes on, or Christian Watson. You just don't really know. So it's really hard to say rest of season because every week is its own animal. But I mean, in the short term, he's outside of the top 10 for me, of the top 10 wide quarterbacks for me right now. He's just, the passing volume isn't there with Devontae Adams, and this is just as a lot is projected going into the regular season. When we were all considering ranking Aaron Rodgers, we just knew Devontae Adams was gone. We said, okay, look, there's really nowhere to go to. There's really nowhere to go to with this ball. And we were talking about last week. We were said, what, Alan Lazard is going to come in here and save Aaron Rodgers in the offense? Like, Alan Lazard was a nice addition, gave Aaron Rodgers a little bit more comfort. They got more Robert Tonyan back. But, it also did help that they were playing the Bears at home. And, they have Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. And now we're going to see a different face of the offense when they go play the Bucs, a strong run defense at home and a strong defense at Tampa Bay, I mean. And they're a strong all-around defense. And it's not going to be very difficult for them to stop the run, take away the Packers' primary strength. And then what's Aaron Rodgers going to do then? Let's see how he does then. I think how Aaron Rodgers responds in week 3 is going to be a very considerable indicator as to how we rank him for the rest of the season.
I agree. I just I think there's obviously not that ceiling without Devontae Adams, and I don't think he's going to get a ton of passing yards each game. So what you're really hoping for are those short touchdown passes that he could get. So this week will be definitely a big test for Green Bay to see how they attack that Tampa Bay defense. So next, Tua, he had this huge game, but actually in the first half, early on in that game, he was not, that Dolphins offense wasn't looking that great. But then, he really got it going with Tyreek and Waddle. I don't know what really happened to Baltimore. It just kind of like all fell apart. To me, even though I think Tua could have a very good season, I mean, he's not going to have any higher value than after this last game.
Absolutely. I think he's not going to have any higher value, but how much more does it regress really? Again, another quarterback who we're going to be understanding how to rank more appropriately after week 3 concludes. Because, we have a very stiff competition. He went on the road at Baltimore, which isn't easy, and overcame a massive deficit, right? And, finally he has these yak monsters in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, who are essentially clones of each other. But, playing against, the best team in the NFL right now, the Buffalo Bills at home, is going to be a whole nother test in itself. So yeah, going back to buy or sell, it's very difficult, man. It's very difficult. I want to believe in it, because the child in me and the fantasy enthusiast in me wants to believe in Tua, and I like to see this kind of stuff. This is so much. It makes the game so much better. But it's only 1 week, right? And we just don't know what to expect. So if we're selling, selling for something that's worth it. Selling for, and I wouldn't mind selling him for like James Robinson, something like that, like in a 1 quarterback league, or whatever else you can get for him. But as far as like the narrative of Tua goes, man, I don't know. I'm undecided right now. I just don't know yet, Brandon.
Yeah, pretty much he's had one great game, one, okay game against the Patriots, but, the Patriots usually scheme very well, defensively. So you're right. This is the only thing is I want to see what he does against Buffalo, but say he has a bad game against Buffalo, and then you kind of lost that high value, that he had this last week. So I guess it truly does depend on what you're really getting back. If maybe you could get back a quarterback and an extra piece, maybe a little lower, depending maybe like a Kirk Cousins or something, and then a good wide receiver or running back to add to your roster. I would probably do that. So next, it's buy or sell Kyle Pitts. So Kyle Pitts has not had a big start this season. I looked; he has had 10 targets, which is still a little under 23% target share for the Falcons. So they're not throwing the ball a ton. I saw someone talking about that teams are just making Drake London beat them, at least right now, doubling Kyle Pitts and everything like that. I would have to assume Pitts is going to get it going during the season. So I think, someone that might be that obviously drafted Kyle Pitts pretty high and is kind of panicking, I would see if I could buy low on Kyle Pitts right now. You're on mute again. You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, we've seen already 1 year of Kyle Pitts under Arthur Smith and not be productive. He had like 3 fantasy relevant weeks of the entire season, and he was like the primary guy. I don't like. We saw Matt Ryan. We saw 1 week of what Michael Pittman can do with Matt Ryan, right? So why couldn't Kyle Pitts get anything done? Like, I'm not denying Kyle Pitts' athletic ability or talent or prowess as a tight end, / wide receiver, but I don't know, man. Like, how much more can we go with? How much more longer can we go with this Kyle Pitts be patient thing? I mean, I think it's time to move on. Like, you got to move on from your studs. When you got to move on from your studs, you just can't have them. You just can't allow them to tank your team. And the pattern weighs heavily in Kyle Pitts not being productive, right? So I mean, it just shows after a while. Like, I believe it'll happen, but is Marcus Mariota going to unlock Kyle Pitts and Drake London at the same exact time while, creating rushing yards for himself? I don't know, man. It's really difficult. The quarterback has a lot to do with it. And I don't know how he's being schemed up. I guess he's playing more in line than he's playing outside. I haven't been paying close attention to it, but it just doesn't sit well with me anymore after a year and 2 weeks of it.
No, I agree. I think he's had a couple tough matchups to start off with. New Orleans, very good defense. LA, pretty good scheming that. So I would like to see that, but no, I totally agree. It could be a thing where, you just, you're not going to get back what you put in, because to get Pitts, you probably had to draft him, higher, then obviously he's going to probably perform this year. So Nets, buy or sell Courtland Sutton. He has 18 targets through 2 games, 24% target share. First of all, I want to say this Broncos offense, the first week they got a lot of passing yards, not a lot of touchdowns, but I thought this offense would be a higher scoring. They struggled for much of that game with the Texans. So how do you feel about the Broncos, and what do you think about Courtland Sutton?
I like Courtland Sutton, but I'm selling him because the Broncos offense is it's like damn near unwatchable. Like, the Hackett's were making the worst calls, and we all assumed that this offense was going to be one of the higher scoring, more just it would be a better offense, but like the play calls are terrible. The game management, clock management is terrible. Like, just I don't really want to be part of the Denver Broncos right now, and I don't know, man. Like, Hackett's had this. He's got his install going. He had his offensive install going all offseason, and it just doesn't seem like it complements the quarterback and the offensive pieces. I mean, they have like 18 tight ends on the field for every single play. Like, I don't like, and Sutton only got an inflated amount of targets because Jerry Jeudy left and he had an injured shoulder. Without Jerry leaving, he wouldn't have had 11 targets or something like that. So I mean, like, we can't count on that until this offense. We can hope rational coaching, it comes through and overcomes the ailments of this offense. But it's just, I don't want to rely on that. I don't want to rely on rational coaching because it's just irrational to rely on rational coaching. That's what I think.
Definitely. I remember there was one play. It was like 3rd and 1 or 2, and they did like a run with their tight end, Beck. And I was like, what are they doing? I don't understand. I don't understand the rotation with Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. It seems weird how they're, kind of use them. And all those tight ends in Seattle, Russ never really threw to the tight ends that much. So it's it's really confusing. So yes, I totally agree. I love Cortland Sutton as a player, but yeah, I think get as much as you can for him now because. And if you take a little bit of a loss, you do, but you have to make the best decisions at the time. And right now, this offense looks like it might take quite maybe all season to get right. So Nets buy or sell Christian Kirk. So I was I know everyone went crazy when the Jazz paid so much for him. After the preseason, I thought he was going to get a ton of targets, and he has. He has 18 targets through 2 games, 27% target share, had 2 touchdowns last game. Obviously, if you have Christian Kirk, I personally am going to keep him because I think he's going to continue to get at least 6 or 7 targets a game. And they seem to be scheming him up to get open in the middle of the field. And if you can, I might try to buy him if someone is not sold on the Jets offense or Christian Kirk.
Yeah, and again, we're in agreement here. I'm definitely buying on Christian Kirk. I'm so happy to see this for him. I wasn't a believer in Christian Kirk, but I'm ready to move off that stance and accept that he's a very viable wide receiver. I don't know. I feel like he's playing a lot out of the slot, and Zay Jones and Marvin Jones are more outside wide receivers. That's just what I'm seeing. But I mean, he's thriving. He's a great, he's always been a great deep threat, and he still is a deep threat to this day. And he's a very good, middle of the field receiver for Trevor Lawrence. He's Trevor Lawrence's guy, and again, another receiver we're going to touch on in a segment later on. And what I found on him is just very encouraging stuff. I found some really good numbers on him going into week 2, and it paid off again. And he went nuts in week 2, and this is only going to keep on going with him. It's going to be he was a steal, like Amon-Ra St. Brown was in the later parts of your draft. Christian Kirk as well. He was one of the super late round wide receivers that somebody got very lucky on.
And lastly, Antonio Gibson. So I might have changed a little bit on Gibson because, in the first 2 games, he had opportunities. He had 22 in the first game, so attempts and targets. And in the second game, he had 18 opportunities. I know in both they fell behind, but in the Jaguar game, it was only a possession. So if he can get at least 15 touches a game, I might try to, buy Antonio Gibson. But I guess in the same sense, when Brian Robinson comes back, if he, it might be the time to sell before he comes back. I know we've kind of gotten back and forth with we both loved Antonio Gibson last year. So what's your thoughts on Gibson after 2 weeks?
I feel like we're kind of seeing a rerun of what happened in the first couple of weeks of 2021, because in week 1, he was heavily utilized against the Chargers at a home game. And, he ran all those routes this year against the Lions. Who did they play? They played the Jacksonville Jaguars. He ran like a bunch of routes and he caught a bunch of passes. And, J.D. McKissic wasn't really involved. And we said, okay, I guess Antonio Gibson's really happening right now for the time being before Brian Robinson gets back, he was heavily involved in the passing game, which was very encouraging to see. And then in week 2, we saw more J.D. McKissic come in again. And this is exactly what happened in week 2 of last year. We saw more J.D. McKissic come in. So I don't know, man. It's Ron. It's Ron Rivera. He's doing whatever he does. For some reason, he just completely pivots off of what he did in week 1. And Antonio Gibson gave him no reason to. Antonio Gibson's a fine talent. But I'm selling Antonio Gibson because, once Brian Robinson comes back, he's going to be a factor. And it's going to even limit Antonio Gibson's ceiling furthermore. I think if you want to acquire Antonio Gibson, do it when Brian Robinson comes back, when his cost is settled down to a consistent price. But right now, if you buy Antonio Gibson, you're going to be paying an inflated price for, a player that's not going to appreciate value in about, 2 to 3 weeks. But if you need the help, go ahead and buy Antonio Gibson right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It's a close line about buying or selling. So now let's just quickly talk about the Bears offense. I know both of us really liked Darnell Mooney before the season. I don't know how you felt about Cole Kmet, but I thought he would be a solid tight end. Justin Fields, obviously, we both really like him. Both Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet, not done much. Darnell Mooney only has 5 targets on 29 routes run in 2 games, but that's 100% route participation. Kmet only 2 targets and 23 routes run in 2 games, 82.1 route participation. they're just not throwing the ball very much, and they're not being very creative. What they did in the preseason to kind of move Fields around, I feel like they're not doing anymore. I know the first game with the weather, so it's fine with that. So maybe, but last week against the Packers, that offense looked just as bad as it did last year. So, and it came to a point when they were down pretty big, and then they just kept on running David Montgomery because that was the only thing that was working. So, do you think that the Bears are going to get anywhere near what we thought they might do with Darnell Mooney, or is it kind of we're going to take a loss for where we drafted Darnell Mooney this year?
I ultimately think we're going to take a loss because it seems like the Bears, they're running the ball a lot to hide the inadequacies of their offensive line. We see what happens when Justin Fields goes back into shotgun. The defensive ends just pin their ears back and they come straight for him, and that pocket collapses in a second. And Justin Fields holds the ball too long. The coaches know all this, so the run game is there to hide all the inadequacies, and they want to take the deep shot with Darnell Mooney every once in a while. Darnell Mooney's like a Nelson Aguilar from like 3 years ago. He's just like this deep shot guy. They're not going to open up this offense. They're not going to spread the offense. Now we'll see what happens with the Houston Texans. We'll see how much they run, and this whole theory of mine holds up of them running the ball to hide the offensive line, because the Texans don't have a great pass rush. They don't really have a pass rush at all. So, we'll see what happens. It's going to be a low scoring game. There might not even be a reason for the Bears to open up the passing game, but yeah, it's not looking good for the offensive pieces. I have Darnell Mooney in a couple spots. I'm not happy about it. Cole Kmet and Darnell Mooney are great talents, but it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen this year. I don't know how an offensive line that's already bad gets better. I don't see it.
Yeah, definitely. I had a little hope in the preseason because they seem to be like moving them around more and everything. This is what I worried about when they hired a defensive coach, because I really wanted them to hire an offensive coach to maybe be a little more creative with Justin Fields and everything. And maybe they go to what the Packers are doing with two running backs, with Herbert and Montgomery. I want to say, we kind of talked about Herbert, but Herbert really went down in touches in the week against the Packers. Montgomery got the 4 red zone touches. Herbert didn't get any. So we'll see if it was just kind of, that game or how it goes moving forward. If they're going to go forward with this running, the ball quite a bit, I would think both are going to need to touch the ball a lot. It's just disappointing because, I think Fields is like 33rd in the NFL in like pass attempts so far. So that means, the worst. But so we'll see, if it gets any better. But definitely the Bears offense, looks bad. And I guess what you're hoping for is just a long play, like in that first game with the bad weather where Fields kind of ran around and just found a couple guys that they were able to run it in. So now let's go into, I'll share this Excel sheet that you did for weighted opportunity scores, and I'll let you have the floor.
Yeah, so I've been using a new metric to determine the success and opportunity that receivers on football teams are receiving in regards to fantasy football, right? So weighted opportunity rating, or what's the acronym? WOPR, right, is the acronym for it. So we'll just call it Whopper. So when we're talking about Whopper, we're using it as a descriptive stat and a predictive stat. And that basically means that a descriptive stat is telling us what happened, right? And the predictive stat obviously is going to tell us how to predict or project future success going forward when we see significant data, that heavily favors the player, right? So I've been using it these first 2 weeks of the year. There's a bunch of stats you can use, ADOT and routes per run and targets per route. There's so many different stats, but this is the one I think is the best because what Whopper does is it combines target share and air yard share into one metric, right? And air yard share basically means that it measures the distance the ball travels once it passes the line of scrimmage to the point it goes over the receiver's head, whether it's an incompletion or not, or it hits the receivers in the hand or touches the ground, right? So we measure it by those three instances. So I looked at 3 teams in week 2 and in I think 2 teams in week 1, right? In week 1, I saw Christian Kirk. He's not here right now. I'll bring him up. But Christian Kirk. So basically, if you see a score of 0.70 for Whopper, that is elite. That is elite that is an elite score. That means there's a significant correlation between the future, the wide receiver's current success and his future success, right? So if you look on the screen in front of us right now, we see the Falcons and Rams game from week 2, right? And on top, you see the Falcons receivers and tight ends in red, and on the bottom, you see the Rams wide receivers and tight ends in yellow, right? At the top, you see Drake London, right? And then we'll see the different categories. We see the team he plays for, his position, and then we see air yards per pass attempt. So that's me actually visually charting each pass attempt and the air yards it traveled, right? And then we go over to total air yards, right? So that's his total, each player's total air yards, their air yards percentage, and over the total air yards, their target share percentage, and then I finally calculate their Whopper score, right? So Drake London in week 2 had a 0.78 Whopper score, right? Weighted opportunity rating. That means he had it over 0.70. And what did we say that 0.70 is? That's the threshold for an elite wide receiver Whopper rating. That means he's likely to have great success in the future as a fantasy and NFL, or basically a fantasy wide receiver, right? 0.78 is very good. And then obviously if we look into another guy like Cooper Kupp, right at the bottom, he has a 0.86 score, but that's Cooper Kupp. But that just shows you the magnitude and the weight that it gives to different players, when you're talking about like how good it gives you perspective, basically, right? Then, but let's look at Allen Robinson on the bottom below Cooper Kupp. If you look at his score from week 1, it was way worse. Week 2, it's not that great, 0.33. That is not good. That is bad. That's what they call bad. So Allen Robinson, based off of what I've seen the first 2 weeks, I can confidently say that it's not going to be a good year to have him in fantasy football, right? Let's look at Tyler Higbee, second one down from on the Rams side. A 0.55 weighted opportunity rating. That's pretty good for a tight end. Right now, Tyler Higbee, he is the most targeted tight end in fantasy football, in football, basically. And he has a 0.55 score, right? I don't know what's happening, but in the first week of the season, he had 11 targets. And I think in this year, he had this week he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 targets, right? So, I mean, that's significant. Let's move up to Kyle Pitt.
Real quick on Higbee, do you think when Van Jefferson comes back, that'll change? So since Van Jefferson's been out, they're kind of using him as kind of like the middle of the field guy more? Or do you think that's something so it'll be interesting whenever Van Jefferson comes back, if he continues this all year. But Higbee has been very good at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, it's possible. And then if we go to the top again and we look at Kyle Pitts, second one down on the Falcons, let's look at his WOPR score. 0.26. 0.26 is terrible. It's horrible. It's a horrible score, right? And when we were talking about Kyle Pitts before, and when I allude to he had 3 targets this game, he had 26 total air yards, right? So it tells you that the ball is just it's not traveling. It's just not going to him. It shows that the quarterback has no intention of going towards him for whatever reason. Now, let's see what happens when Drake London becomes a more, when he establishes himself as a legitimate threat. Let's see what happens to Kyle Pitts. Maybe this will be Kyle Pitts' saving grace. Maybe this will be what Kyle Pitts needed, because we got to understand that Kyle Pitts, as talented of as a tight end as he is, he still doesn't have the tools that a wide receiver does to get open. So let's see what happens with Kyle Pitts going forward, and maybe this helps us the buying opportunity that Brandon was talking about. Now, if we go to the New York Jets game, we'll take a look at Garrett Wilson, right? Now, Garrett Wilson has had a strong 2 weeks to open the season, and in week 2, he went off against the Cleveland Browns. In week 2, Garrett Wilson had a 0.79 WOPR score, right? And I believe that's a higher score than Drake London had in week 2. Garrett Wilson and Joe Flacco are just that type of duo that are just going to connect all the time. And look, Garrett Wilson is also a tremendous talent, right? He is a significant talent. I've seen people compare him to Justin Jefferson, of his route running, the way he gets off the line. So I think Garrett Wilson is set up for a very, very strong season. I actually picked up Garrett Wilson this morning and dropped Elijah Moore for Garrett Wilson. And I think Elijah Moore is fine. I think he's a great wide receiver, but there's only so many wide receivers I can handle on my team right now. I don't have enough space for 2 Jets wide receivers. That said, buy Elijah Moore. Stick him on your team. He's a great, wide receiver 3 for the time being. And if we look below Garrett Wilson, we see Tyler Conklin. Tyler Conklin received 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 targets. 4th highest targeted tight end in the league. Has a score of 0.37, which is fine for a tight end, right? We got to weight these things differently for tight ends and wide receivers. So that's really good. So Tyler Conklin, if he's sitting there for your team, go pick him up if you need a tight end. And we see Elijah Moore, a 0.30 WOPR score. Not great. Or not, that's Corey Davis. I'm sorry. Elijah Moore has a 0.27 WOPR score. And I'm not really going to wait. I'm not going to really count that against him because I know Elijah Moore is a very talented wide receiver. So, that said, I still think Elijah Moore is a strong fantasy buy. So that's basically how it works. And if you guys want to know the formula for it, I'll write it down right here. So let's see if I can. I'll see if I can enlarge it. Here, I'll write it for you guys. Let's get this text. Let's get this font going a little bit bigger. Okay. So here's the formula. It's 1.5 or the 1.5 times target share percentage plus 0.7 times. I'm sorry. There's math involved. Times air yard percentage, right? And that equals WOPR. That's the formula right there. If you want to do it for yourself. The thing is you gotta actually chart the air yards out for yourself or acquire them through a third party that you pay a subscription, possibly a subscription for. I think FTN, the fantasy network, FTN provides air yards and probably some other sites. But that's the formula if you want to know how to do it. So that's basically WOPR, and I'll start charting more and more and putting as many as I possibly can. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
No, that was very interesting and everything. Something I'll definitely have to check out more. And that is very interesting seeing that Drake London got up that high and Garrett Wilson was that high. And that's disappointing that A-Rob is that low because I bought A-Rob at a lot of places before the season because I thought, I have
him in a league we play with. And you can also see here the way that the formula works is that, the 1.5 target share is more heavily weighted than air yards because it is multiplied by 1.5, giving it a higher value or, more weight, and 0.7, not so much. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to try to figure out how to weigh in, accurate targets, catchable targets, because I think I heard an interesting term today called prayer yards, which is basically a lot of air yards that are thrown up to receivers, but they're not catchable yards, and we're still counting them. So I want to see how, catchable passes comes into play in the entire scenario. So I'll be trying to add that in, hopefully, if I have the time, to the entire formula.
Yeah, I think that's really cool information and everything. So we'll obviously come back to that in future weeks and kind of look to see how it was in predicting how receivers really go. So this is what we've kind of started the past couple weeks, the thin slicing segment. So I'll let you go first.
All right. So for my thin slicing, again, thin slicing comes down to, I'll remind you guys, it's basically a psychological or philosophical terms that just discusses, how you have these feelings about something happening in the future based off of very thin or very narrow moments of exposure to certain happenings and moments, right? So mine basically comes back down to Nelson Aguilar on the Patriots offense, right? In the preseason, I watched him on 8/9/22. I saw him make one play for the Patriots. And I said, you know what? There could be something here. I said, I'm quoting myself. I said, I just knee-jerk picked up Nelson Aguilar in a 12-team dynasty league. He breathed life into the Patriots offense tonight. He's most likely sitting on your waiver wire right now, right? And he's still sitting on the team that I picked him up for, right? So in week 1, he had 58%. He played 58% of the snaps and caught 2 of 5 targets. Wasn't really a factor. Week 2 against the Steelers, 50% of he only played 50% of the snaps, caught 6 of 6 targets for 110 yards, 18 yards per catch and 1 touchdown. And one of his catches for that touchdown catch was what everybody was referring to as him mossing the DB, because he literally went over the DB's face, caught the ball, and took it in for a touchdown on a go route. So I think Nelson Aguilar basically deserves a bigger role in this offense. He was added last year. He was the first wide receiver added in free agency by the Patriots in 2021. Didn't really have a big role. It was more Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby Myers. But Nelson Aguilar, I think, brings the element to that team that they wanted out of, I forgot his name, out of the Baylor wide receiver that we love so much that they drafted. What was his name?
Oh, Tyquan Thornton.
Tyquan Thornton, right? They wanted something out of Tyquan Thornton. Nelson Aguilar brings it. And Nelson Aguilar had a 100% catch rate on 6 targets with 18 yards per catch. That's pretty good. So that was my thin slicing moment that I had in the preseason, which kind of like, it's coming to fruition now.
So for me, I don't technically know if this is thin slicing, but it's kind of going back on, I should have gone with my gut from the beginning, and thinking that Donovan Peoples-Jones cannot be, counted on, because I kind of went back and I was like, oh, he had this big game week 1. Maybe I need to reevaluate and everything. Had, I believe, 1 target this last game. He just can't be counted on. It's just, he's got great physical tools, talent. I know it's, with Jacoby Brissett, but still, I mean, he should get more targets than 1. And it's just up and down. Consistency isn't there. I lost the game because I played him. Mm-hmm. I lost by like 4. And like any of my other receivers I put in would have won me the game. So, he's going to have big weeks. He definitely is. He's a big play type receiver that can do that. It's just, I'm not going to rely on him anymore unless I absolutely have to. So that's kind of my moment that I should have trusted my gut more and not second guess myself.
And that's 100%. That's a thin slice. That's a classic thin slicing moment, because you said you should have gone with your gut, your quote unquote gut, and that's what that's your intuition, right? And that's what it basically comes down to. It's like all the moments that we've lived as people. Oh, I'm sorry, guys, my battery's running low. Let me put that in real quick. It should be in. All the moments that we've lived as people, all the years that we've lived as people, we've subconsciously kind of like gathered all these little bits of information and experience, and we kind of use them to our in the best way we can to survive in the world. And with fantasy football, we've been playing it for so long that we've had so many instances of knowing when to see something is BS or it's valid, right? And Donovan Peoples-Jones struck a chord with that intuition you had about being of all those years of fantasy football, seeing all that BS, right? But we're still emotional animals, and we still want that heavy target volume, those 11 targets. How do we say no to 11 targets, right? But your intuition is like, don't do it, right? It's kind of like it's like a field general on the battlefield, right? When he just knows there's something wrong, like the enemy's flanking, he just sees he's like, this is too easy. What is happening? Like, this shouldn't be the way it is. Like, what is happening here? And like, he just knows that the enemy's coming up behind him on a cavalry or something like that. Like, that's just all that is. So 100% good thin slicing moment, Brandon. Yeah. And I know this is kind of like a weird segment but I like how this touches on that intuitive side of a fantasy football analyst more than it's the opposite end of the spreadsheets that we were just looking at. It's just the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah, I think totally, because kind of the same thing with the analytics crowd and the film crowd. You have to use both. You can't just rely on one. So I think you can rely on some analytics, some of the stats, some of the predictive scoring, but also it's a game where you got to go on your gut. Sometimes football doesn't make sense. Sometimes it doesn't make sense that someone goes off or everything like that. So definitely on that. So I said last week we're going to talk about some prospects. I was going to do 2, but because we went a little long on some of the other segments, I'll only do 1. And he's a player that's kind of gaining steam, especially in the Devy community. A lot of people like him. So let me pull this up. Yeah, so it is Chase Brown. He is the running back for Illinois. You see his stats. Last year, he had a great year with 1,000 yards. This year, he already has over 400 yards. It's pretty much all of Illinois' offense. Their passing game is not very good. I like him. He shows good power. He shows some good burst and speed. He can catch the ball. I think he could be a guy that could move up into, kind of the realm of where Dameon Pierce went last year. But he actually has the production in college that Dameon Pierce. We're just going off, limited film and everything. And Brown looks to have gotten stronger this year. I think he looks a little faster. And actually, I found a little clip on Twitter that I want to just show real quick. So I'll remove this. Let's see. Here it is. Hold on just a second. There we go. Okay, this one you're going to see I'll start from the beginning. This is
so he's 5'11", 205, right?
Yeah. So I know this is against Wyoming, but I just think this shows what he really does. So
I love this.
Yeah, so let's roll this.
All right, so we got some split zone. Got some penetration. Very nice.
Yeah, so he just cuts outside, he runs through that tackler, so able to avoid that one,
Is it slowing down right now because it's just the way it is right now?
I guess maybe because I'm streaming right now, but I
mean, for sure.
Yeah, so at least you see a little bit of what he can do. He also in that game had a nice touchdown catch over the shoulder. Like I said, he's not going to be as high as some of these other top end running back prospects, but I think he's one that's going to definitely jump up boards and be more of a, kind of, like I said, possibly a Dameon Pierce where people don't really know about him. But, if he gets drafted in the fourth-ish round, then he could really, come onto the scene on the NFL level. So he's someone that you definitely should kind of check out. I'm not going to ask you to watch any Illinois games because they're brutal.
Well, you're watching them, apparently. You're obviously watching them, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. But the good part is they give Chase Brown the ball at least 20 times a game, so you're getting most of him. The passing game is not very good for Illinois. They haven't had a good quarterback in I don't know how long.
I saw he had 39 attempts against Indiana for like 199 yards or something like that. 39 attempts. Yeah, that just shows that he can go with the ball.
Yeah, he definitely can. Take the load. They did not play him at all in the spring or fall camp because they said they knew they were going to give him the ball like a ton. So they pretty much said, we're not going to make you run the ball at all in the off season because we know we're going to give you a ton of carries. Illinois' middle of the road team in the Big Ten, but because of him, they're going to stay into some games, and he's an exciting player. He can break long runs. So that's our Devy segment for this week. I'll try to have a better video next time, but So we're going to close this show with what we've been doing every week. 2 games we're excited to watch this week. I'll start with the first one. We talked about it earlier, but the Buffalo-Miami game. See if Buffalo can continue. Josh Allen just dominating on the field. Stephon Diggs dominating. See if they get Gabe Davis back. And then mostly see if Miami can keep this up against a good Bills defense that shut down the Rams. I'm very interested in this divisional game, how it kind of goes, if it's going to be a high-scoring affair or if both defenses can kind of figure out the talented offenses.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the most anticipated game of the entire week. My first game is the Bengals and Jets, and we kind of just alluded to it before. Like we talked about, the struggles of the Bengals. They lost to Mitchell Trubisky, they lost to Cooper Rush. Now, possibly they're going to lose to Joe Flacco in their first 3 games. Can they overcome it? If they cannot beat the Jets, who have one of the worst secondaries in the league, if they cannot do this, I don't care if it's on the road. We've got real problems. We've got problems in people. It needs to be. It's not going to be good for the Bengals. So this is going to be like. Sadly, this is a test. A Jets road game is a test for the Bengals, who just went to the Super Bowl and nearly won the Super Bowl. And then we got the Jets on the other side. We got Joe Flacco. Can he win? Can Garrett Wilson keep up his momentum? How does Elijah Moore develop? How does Breece Hall develop? I think Breece Hall is going to have a great week this week. I think Breece Hall is going to see some fantastic utilization. I'm trying to trade. I offered T. Higgins for Breece Hall today. I said, just take T. Higgins. I'm stacked at wide receiver. In redraft. I'm stacked on this team with wide receiver. I said, I'm going to overpay for Breece Hall because I have so much faith in him. As the year progresses, I think he's going to be an amazing running back. I think right now, if you can get Breece Hall, pay for him over slightly because I think he's going to work out. So yeah, that's my first game.
No, that's a good take on Breece Hall because he only had like 27% snap share last week, but he way outperformed Michael Carter. Michael Carter couldn't really get anything going, and Breece Hall, just an eye test, he's just more explosive. So I think they're going to start using him more. So that's very interesting. And with T. Higgins, one of the things that I always worry about with him, same as what Mike Williams, they always get hurt. I mean, they're great when they're on the field, but they always get hurt, and then they both of them have those other receivers. I know Keenan Allen's out, but anyway, my second game is Detroit, Minnesota. Is Minnesota going to bounce back? Is Detroit going to keep up this offense? I think this could be a pretty high scoring game because both have good receivers, good running game. So very excited for that game. A lot of fantasy players in there. So hopefully it stays to a high-scoring game, but knowing how things usually go, it's probably going to be like 6-3 or something. But I hope it's a high-scoring affair.
And my final game is going to be the Jags-Chargers. I want to see how Trevor Lawrence does. I believe they're on the road in LA against the Chargers. Brandon, I think this is going to be a really good test for your team. I think the Jags should be favored right now to win the AFC South. I don't think there's really any team that really stands out as much as the Jags do right now. Their offense looks much better under Peterson. I think Travis Etienne might get some more run this week, given the assumed game script and the way that the Chargers could run it up on the on the Jags and against the secondary with J.C. Jackson back there and Asante Samuel. Is it Asante Samuel Jr.?
Yeah.
He's back there now, and let's see how Christian Kirk holds up. Let's just see how, even if the Jags lose, let's see if they lose, in good fashion or if they just get blown out. Like there's different ways of losing that provide a narrative for the team. Let's just see what they do. Let's just see if they see a surprise. And on the Chargers side, let's see how Austin Eckler, how he gets more usage. But I primarily want to watch this game because of the Jags. I want to see how they perform on the road. I'm interested. They have my attention.
It's funny. I almost put this as my second game, but I didn't want to be considered a homer for doing it. So I'm glad you did. I am actually very interested because I know, it's different seasons and everything, but predominantly the last 15 years, anytime the Jags have to go to the West Coast, they get like the shit beat out of them. I know when they've gone to the Chargers, Philip Rivers has torn them apart like almost every time. So that'll be very, very interesting. And yeah, for the offense, I think Etienne could be a big part. I think Evan Ingram, he in a waiver article I did this week, I said, in deep leagues, Evan Ingram is good. He's getting about 5 targets a game. They're not like deep targets, but they're looking for him. He's actually catching the ball. So that's always good. And if, with those good corners, if they lock down, say, Marvin Jones and maybe Christian Kirk, then, maybe the tight ends would be open. So that'll be definitely interesting. And I got to imagine they're going to scale. They can't be running James Robinson 23 times a game. I mean, I know he's looked good, but I've been surprised that Etienne truly has been kind of like a third down change of pace back, rather where I thought it would be more of a 50-50 split. So maybe that changes because, Etienne didn't have a great first game. I thought he looked better in the second game. But, yeah, that'll be definitely interesting. And, man, how bad is the AFC South that you said that the Jets could, win the division when people were wondering, if they're going to have the first pick again. The Titans looked horrible. I don't know what the Colts are doing. I mean, when Michael Pittman's not out there, they really don't have anyone to throw the ball to. And, the Texans are kind of I don't really know what they're doing.
Yeah, I was never a Davis Mills believer. I just heard so much hype about Davis Mills in the offseason. And you just only have to watch a couple of games to know that he wasn't really an adequate passer. He's serviceable, but I just don't understand what all the hype was about. And going back to the Jags, this is another thin slicing moment I had. I think they're kind of moving away from Zay Jones a little bit. They're sticking with Christian Kirk, but I think, they tried Zay Jones out in the first week. and he had some red zone opportunities that were missed and some end zone opportunities. And Evan Ingram wasn't so much involved, but I think now they're starting to shift back to the classic Doug Peterson tight end focus, where Christian Kirk's going to still be great, but I think Evan Ingram's going to be more involved. I think they're starting to shift more towards Ingram as Ingram's starts to become more and more reliable. I think they're going to start shifting towards more towards Ingram.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because I thought Zay Jones would be way more involved just based on the little preseason work he had with Trevor. But I guess that Kirk said in the in Jacksonville, like after preseason, he said we haven't really shown anything, and I guess he was right, because he's getting the ball way more. Zay is probably stuck to the maybe 2 or 3 targets a game, and he's going to have this one big game every now and then, but you're not going to really know. Kind of his career, like when he was with the Raiders last year, he would have a big touchdown in a game, but you couldn't really consistently do that. And he's still third fiddle behind Marvin Jones and Christian Kirk. So definitely, it just shows sometimes things that we think in preseason don't really come to fruition in the regular season.
Absolutely.
All right, so that's our show this week. So we will see you guys next week. Enjoy all the games.
Later, guys.